Okay, so we are doing the very first episode of the Manifest podcast today, and we are joined here with Dr. Megan Goff. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Megan. I am a dentist in Perth, Western Australia. And I've been over here for 12 years. So I studied in New Zealand and spent a year working in like trauma and oral surgery, and then came over to Melbourne, spent a few years over east, and then I've been over here out west, which is, I like it way better over here.
Yeah.
West is best, so.
That's right.
So yeah.
So what made you actually move to WA? Like what was the whole process of that?
I moved from New Zealand to Melbourne. I'd broken up with a long-time boyfriend, needed a bit of a change, and I had lots of my girlfriends from school living in Melbourne at the time, so I was like, right, let's go there. So that was a bit of a jump on a plane with a suitcase. Always assumed I'd head back to New Zealand eventually, or within a couple of years, but what was that? It's been, nearly 13 years, and we're here for good, so... Spent a few years over east, and in Melbourne at the time there was like a huge oversupply of dentists, and I was pretty new in terms of practicing, so you could get a job quite easily actually, because dentists tend to work as contractors, so there were lots of jobs, but you would turn up and you might have one person to see the whole day, which isn't really viable to sit around doing nothing for most of the day. It's not. So, then I went to country Victoria, and we were the only dentists within, 200 kilometres or something. So, lots of farmers, they chew on a lot of wheat, they grind their teeth a lot, and there's always lots and lots of patch-up jobs. It was really high volume, which was really good getting, into private practice, because you've got to learn to be able to keep, dentistry is find a problem, fix it, on to to the next one, and I think everyone can probably attest to having a dentist keeps you in the waiting room for a long time. So we try our best. But so then when I came to go over to WA, at the time my fiance had sort of moved up to the country from Melbourne with me. And said, I'll just do sort of any old job. He's a carpenter by trade and was sort of foreman or site supervisor, so he was pretty used to doing some pretty interesting work in his field. And he worked on a farm as a farmhand, and I think he lasted about 3 months before he was, because I said to him, I don't know that you're going to be very happy. And so he went back to Melbourne, so we were going in between for about 6 months, so that's why we decided to come out west. I threw my CV at places that he could get lots of work, and because he wanted to go into mining and stuff, so ended up doing a Skype interview in the middle of our honeymoon. I think I was in Portugal. Nice. And that was in Mandurah, and I was like, yep, let's go. Actually, there's something interesting about that job, because it's kind of hard to land I don't want to move somewhere without a job, but it's hard to get a job before you're actually where you're going to go, because we didn't really know exactly where we were going to settle.
Must be scary, having to move and then not knowing what's going to happen, where you're going to be.
I don't know. I mean, back then I didn't really have anything. Wasn't really a big deal. We'd gone travelling for a bit, and so we only really had we didn't really have any stuff. We had some personal things. We had an old Holden ute, and we could kind of go anywhere. So it didn't really feel scary. But I don't know. I think sort of moving about. When I studied in New Zealand, I don't know, it seems different now. Everyone just moved out of home. Everyone, there's, New Zealand, there's only this university does this, and it's not in your city, because, the whole New Zealand is, 4 or 5 million people, probably 4 million people when I was last there. So, it's quite normal for a 17-year-old to get on a plane and just, go off to university or whatever. So I didn't find it scary. I don't know if I would now. Or not.
Well, you've already done it, and you've overcome any kind of anxiety that would have come with it anyway.
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely moving from New Zealand initially, that was quite hard, because I'd been with my boyfriend since I was 16, and beforehand, there was a lot of, you know, he's a lovely, lovely guy. He just wasn't, you know, the right partner for me, which it's kind of hard. I'm trying to think of what the theory is. I have to look it up later, but when something's not great, but it's fine, it doesn't really push people out, you know, to the point where they're going to make change.
Yeah.
You know, like there's this whole thing like...
There's no inspiration, there's no... I mean, I think I agree with you in some way. Like, if your partner isn't making you better, like, I think that's something you need to look at.
Yeah.
In regards to a relationship, because if in relationships, I find they either bring you down or they make you better.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely at a point where and this goes for partners and friends and pretty much everyone, is that, you know, if you aren't adding value and enhancing my life, family relative friends, thing. But yeah, certainly, like, you know, friends or partners, if you're not enhancing my life, then you're not in it. Taking into consideration every relationship has, you know, ups and downs, but yeah, and I think I learned as well, because so I've got two young boys, they're 6.5 and 8, and so the fiance that I moved across to WA with, we ended up getting divorced. Can't remember. It must be about 3 or 4 years now. 4 years we've been separated. Yeah. That was a huge, like, that was a very, very, very scary thing for me to leave, like, my kid's dad. And the interesting thing about that was that it sort of made up in my head how awful it might, you know, like it could be, you know, and what it would be like for the kids and all of that. And it's not. It's actually, like, really wonderful. Like, he's really good. I'm really good. We're both, you know, really still quite stable, you know, and the kids are super happy. We live close by, you know, we've still got a really great friendship. Like, he's definitely part of our, you know, our family. And even if he has the boys, he drops them off at school. I live closer to the school by a little bit, so sometimes he'll drop in and we'll just have a cup of coffee and have a chat, and it's really nice. So I think sometimes you get into your head about what something's going to be like in worst case scenario, catastrophizing.
Yeah.
And yeah, none of that stuff kind of happened. I've got, like, the dream blended family. It's really, really cool. So,
that's good.
But yeah, that was probably that was scarier than packing up a suitcase and leaving.
Yeah. Well, I mean, any kind of divorce would be difficult. I mean, I think most divorces are difficult because you've invested so much time in that relationship, and especially if you have children, you often get in your own head, like, how's this going to affect them?
Yeah.
Is it going to make them think that they weren't good enough to keep you together?
Well, and that's the thing, we don't hear that many stories of, like, separated families or co-parenting families who are really doing, like, who are doing it really, really, really well, you know. All we hear often is the stories about this ex-husband or that ex-husband, and, you know, we've come to some decisions, you know, with sorting out, like, the financial stuff with us, and lots of people say to me, you know, oh, you know, is it this, or you could be, you know, basically you could be getting more from him. And I'm like, well, he's got these things on, you know, that he wants to achieve and that he has to financially put into. I'm also quite stable in myself, so I don't need that to be able to feed the kids. Yeah. So, you know, I'm great, you know, fortunate for that. And I think what a lot of people, and I don't know, I wonder if this is true, but what would it be worth to have a really, you know, financially, like, put a dollar amount on it? Like, what would you pay to have a really, you know, healthy, functioning, you know, happy relationship with your, you know, ex-husband or your, you know, kid's father? Most people would put a value on that, because that, you know, the kids are happy, everyone's better off. Yeah. And so I'm like, yeah, I could screw down to the nitty-gritty, you know, dollar-wise, and, you know, but that would likely really impact, you know, how our relationship is with each other, him and I, but also it would impact how stable he is then to provide a home for our kids and all that sort of stuff. So everyone makes choices, I think, and just because you can, or you might be owed, you know, like, something, doesn't necessarily mean you have to take it.
Well, I think the biggest mistake a lot of couples make, in my experience, from what I've been told from so many different people, is that a lot of the times the kids are not only more affected, but they are used as leverage to hurt their partner if the partner's done something wrong, when really that should be between the husband and wife and not getting the kids involved, because ultimately they're the ones who suffer from it. And I've often heard a lot of my friends and people I've met over time that they experienced a lot of these types of family issues, and it's caused a lot of relationships issues with them. Like they often find that, if I commit to this relationship, am I going to go through the same experience as my father or my mother? Am I going to be put through the exact same traumatic experience? And I think that puts a lot of fear through people when they get into their own relationship. Like they learn or they don't, and I think that's the real difficult part about being in a broken family, is that you need to not point fingers at any of the parents, but learn from their mistakes and make sure that when you get into a relationship you don't repeat the same mistakes. And I think that's a difficult situation.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, you can't learn something if you're not aware of it to start with. So first you actually have to have the awareness of, see these little behaviours I'm doing, like what's actually going on here? Because when you, especially like a lot of these unconscious, behaviours or things that you might do, they're coming, your body, you don't do things for no reason, even if you don't know what that reason is. There's usually something, if you really dig down, that's causing this cascade of
I think
things.
From my experience, I tend to do things subconsciously without even being fully aware. It's something that I've picked up over the years when I've been in survival mode, or like when I've gone through a traumatic experience. I kind of feel like it's going to happen again, so I need to do the same habits. But what I don't understand, or didn't understand at the time, is that that's the reason why I keep going through the same patterns in life, is because I'm still thinking the same thoughts, I'm still feeling the same feelings, which then leads to the same outcomes, and I end up doing the same actions. And it's taught me a lot of years before I realised that if I want different circumstances, I have to change my way of thinking, how I feel, and what I do. And that's ultimately what led me to this past 6 months, where I went through this massive self-development stage where I realised I'm making the same mistakes over and over again. I need to stop for a little while and actually do some self-reflection and realise, like, why am I doing this? Why do I feel like I'm in this position? And then I think through that self-reflection myself, I learnt that I had to look into the past and all the mistakes I've made, all the traumas, and actually really reflect on every single one of them and take a lesson from every single one of them, and then try not to repeat those same mistakes and just make sure I keep moving forward from it. But the hardest thing for me was just facing a lot of those things, because it was quite difficult, especially a lot of the death that I've experienced in my life with friends and family, and I've made a lot of stupid mistakes with relationships. I've actually taken a lot of reflection on that as well, and realised that the reason why I pushed a lot of women away was because of the fact that I was trying to be with them out of a place of neediness and desperation, and I used to wonder why it was pushing them away. But when I experienced that myself recently, it made me realise, like, I feel that energy. I can feel that it's not coming from a place from love, it's coming from a place of neediness and desperation. And when I experienced that myself personally, I completely understood where these women were coming from. And I had to do some work on myself. I had to learn to love myself, work on myself, and take care of myself in a way that I never have before. And I realised that until you actually do the inner work, you will constantly keep bringing your insecurities and your past experiences into the next relationship. And if you want the next relationship to work, you have to accept the fact that you've got to do the inner work first, because if you don't, you'll just keep repeating the exact same processes over and over again.
Well, yeah, I mean that's right. I mean, and you're talking about like neediness, and that's one thing I've had to try to like balance as well. Is okay, it's okay to have needs, and it's okay to ask my partner to meet that need. However, that's also not their job. It's my, it's my job at the end of the day. So yes, I can say, and ask my partner, hey, look, I need XYZ right now. And that could just be, hey, I need reassurance because I'm feeling insecure about XYZ. And let's just pretend that they can't do that for me. I don't know. Maybe they are super busy or not in a space themselves where they have the capacity to, hold space for whatever the shit that I want to talk about is. And that's valid too, because it's the whole pour from an empty cup thing. Like, but where was I going with this? Oh, so when, it's okay to ask for that. It's okay to have needs, but also then being okay and having done enough stuff on yourself to be like, okay, I need to be able to meet this need for myself. Yeah. And how can I do that? And actually I remember early on when I started doing a lot of my, personal development and inner work and things was, like learning about, okay, well, how can I ask for this and not be, typical like women, we're taught, very, subconsciously to, not be direct.
Yeah.
To, fish for, and to be vague and to put something out and hope that someone picks it up and gives you what you want.
Yeah.
Which is not clear. It's not, and as much as I do have awareness sometimes and being like, hey, look, I actually need whatever it is, need reassurance or need whatever. I also have done the stuff to be like, okay, like, and if they can't, being okay with that, and not being all like, oh, you're not supportive. And look, if they're never there for you, then why are they even in your life? But like, let's take the instance that they can't. Is really writing down and being like, how can I meet this need for myself right now? Yeah. And having like actual tools and having like, okay, I can do this, this, and this.
Well, I think
and having lists.
A big mistake a lot of people make is they put on this persona to attract a certain person, and when they finally get them, they no longer feel the need to keep that persona up, and they subconsciously slowly release that, and then their true identity is revealed, and then their partner starts thinking the exact same thing, like, what's going on? Like, this isn't the person that I originally met. And I think the best thing to do when you're approaching a brand new relationship is do not be afraid to be your true self, be authentic, be genuine. And if they don't like it, then you know that they aren't for you, because you'd rather know now than later down the track. So I feel like I've had to learn that myself. Like, don't put on any act, don't be someone else, just be yourself. And if they're not interested, they're not for me.
Well, and that exactly, like,
it's funny how when you do a lot of self-reflection, you realise where you've been going wrong throughout your life, and when you start actually putting the effort into yourself rather than putting it into somebody else, you start feeling better in your mindset and in physicality. Like, when I started going to the gym and actually putting in the mental work and training my mind over and over again to remove any negativity, remove any doubt, and just keep telling myself I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. It kind of blew me away how I've been able to not only stay consistent at the gym, but I've also been able to quit toxic habits that have taken me years to get rid of. And I still am blown away that I've been able to quit something like cigarettes for nearly 50 days now.
Good job.
So yeah, it's been challenging, but I haven't broken that whatsoever in that entire period. But where the previous mindset I would have buckled under any kind of challenge, where I've had a lot of challenges since I quit, and I still keep telling myself, no, I'm doing this for a reason. It's for my health, and I'm doing it for my sisters. They deserve to have a good big brother who they can be proud of, and that's ultimately why I just keep trying to better myself every day, because I get told a lot from my family, like my sisters look up to me, and that was when I had a really hard look at myself and thought, I can't keep going the way I'm going. I need to be better, because I feel like they deserve a better big brother, and that's where I'm just constantly trying to learn, trying to grow as a person, as a man. And it's been a journey, but I've actually learned a lot about myself through that self-reflection process, where I've realised where I've been going wrong, and it's either you make the change or you don't.
Like you said, about, some things you've been really proud of yourself for being consistent with, giving up the cigarettes, or, consistent with, the exercise or whatever. One thing I've learned, and I've learned this in my career and in just life stuff, is the more things you do and that you celebrate yourself for like doing and achieving, doesn't even matter if it's whatever it is, the more you prove to yourself that you can actually do XYZ, like I remember when I was in dental school, and whenever we would learn like more complicated things, I remember being in, my final years and learning, complex root canals and things that just seemed like I would never learn it. Like I'm just never going to be able to get this, right?
Yeah.
Every single time that would happen, I would think back to the very first time when we were doing like on a simulation, mouth. The very first test we ever did, we had to drill like a L-shaped cavity, like one of the most simple sort of things. And we were also, why they did this for our first practical test, I don't know. We were also supposed to do it in the mirror. So doing everything in a mirror, now it's completely, I don't even think about it at all. It's just like driving, or it doesn't matter what it is. When you first start, you're like thinking about everything, and then it becomes, just unconscious. Anyway, that first test, simple thing, I didn't do an L, I did an arrow. Mine was an arrow, not an L. And I had to reset the test. I think I got like 49% because there were some things that were okay about it, despite not being the right shape. But in that next year, or even that next 6 months, or the next semester, when I learned harder and harder things, doing that first thing, that L cavity prep, was like, I could do it with my eyes closed now. Like, that is like ridiculously easy. Like now, after, having clinical practice, including my training years, which we did saw a lot of patients, I feel like I could do that in about 2 seconds, wouldn't even think about it. So anyway, getting to my point is, now whenever I start something and it feels really hard, I'm like, remember the L. Go back and remember that, because that felt really, really hard, and now it's like nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also like when you didn't pass that test, a lot of people would have usually given up because they didn't complete their course, but you kept going because it was something that you wanted to do, and you didn't allow failure to bring you down. You used it as a stepping stone to keep going.
Also, I want to point out, we were supposed to be doing it through the mirror, and when I looked around the second time, because there was quite a few people who had to redo it, not a single person they were holding the mirror, and they were, upside down, like looking. So I'm like, well, everyone was bloody cheating anyways, back when that one. So I was like, okay, I felt all right about that then. Yeah, it's a funny thing, like in terms of like persevering with stuff, and like on your journey into, creating this podcast, and that, you really have to keep making that choice to keep doing it.
Despite the challenges that pop up and the things that get in the way that keep, like for me personally, I had a lot of things come in the way that was kind of feeling like life was either testing me or really trying to make me realise that if you really want to do this, life is going to test you to the point where everything's going to feel like it's not going to work out, but it's all in your mind. If you truly believe that you want to do this, and this is something that you can see in the long run, like you have done, this is your opportunity to prove to life, no matter what life throws at me, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep making content, and I'm going to keep improving no matter what, because it's all about starting off something new. I understand it's going to be difficult at first, it's going to feel shaky, but as long as you keep practicing and you keep learning, growing from each and every experience, I think it's going to turn into something that I'll actually really enjoy and love, because you just never know who you'll meet. You'll never know what kind of conversations you'll have with people, and that's always something I've enjoyed. I've always enjoyed meeting people and learning new experiences and learning how their life has been. I've always been genuinely curious about all sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing. You can use that along so many different things. So
Yeah, exactly.
I was listening to you just then, and like, to be clear, I hated dentistry for 10 years.
Really?
10 years. I hated it, and I wanted to quit often, right?
Oh.
And this is where, look, there was enough in it that I enjoyed, obviously. But this is where, you know, like with yourself, with doing this or other things, you need to invest enough, you know, as long as you don't want to do this to something that's completely against what feels good for you. And so when I say I hated it, I'll tell you why in a minute, but
Yeah.
because I'd invested so much time and money, because dentistry degrees are not cheap,
No.
and also obviously that sort of doing that sort of work is, especially when I became a single mum as well, is that luckily, you know, it's quite well earning. I don't have to work, you know, 50 hours a week to be able to still, you know, support my children and all that sort of thing. And it's not always as lucrative as people think, but, you know, I have a very comfortable life. So in knowing that, okay, if I quit dentistry, what else could I do to provide that? You know, for me to be able to earn a similar income, I would have had to work twice as much, and then I wouldn't be away from my kids and things. But it took me 10 years to like it, like really love it. And I think the thing that changed, and I don't know, I think it happened, a lot of stuff happened for me on my like journey when I was pregnant with my second son. He was a catalyst for just so much change for me. For 10 years, I was trying to be a dentist, and like I had this idea in my head of what a dentist should be like and how they should act and how they should speak and how they should be, right? And so I was spending, and back then I was working full time before I had my children. I was spending, you know, like a huge part of most of my days essentially like masking, you know, I probably will go into this because there's other things, but like trying to be something that I just wasn't me, which took a load of energy. I don't know if you might have to cut that one out.
No.
That takes so much energy. So I was like super drained. I would go home and I'd just be like really, really drained from working because I was, you know, trying to be a certain way. And since I was like, you know what, I'm just going to be myself. Yes, people think some of my patients think I'm a bit mad. I am a bit mad. But one thing I learned was the ones that really I liked working with and that they liked the way I was would like me, and they would come back to see me, and they would tell, you know, people in their life who were similar to them about me, because they would, you know, they would be like, oh, Megan's great, go see her.
Yeah.
So I got more and more and more of, you know, the patients and the people who I really enjoy seeing, who I really click with, who liked the way that I did things, and less of people who wanted, you know, a very formal dental experience.
Someone who didn't want to.
Because that's just, you know, like, yes, I can be serious when I need to, but I'm also myself a lot more. And everyone was happy because more people who liked that came to see me. So I saw a larger proportion of people who enjoyed that, and it was good. I had to learn two other things to like dentistry. One, because I'm such a like strong empath, is it's okay to care, it's okay to feel for people, you know, like people can feel that energy from you, but don't care more than they do. Their problems are not your problems. You're here to be able to help them and support them and help them with whatever problem they've come to.
Yeah.
And this, you can think that in all top things, relationships or friends or work, doesn't matter what it is. But at the end of the day, they're not yours to hold or keep or to, you know, to impact you, because that was, you know, happening for me. And also the old, the people pleaser behaviour, which was very, and that's shown up in relationships. You can see those patterns. I'll loop back to that in a sec. But I had to learn not to, you know, bend over backwards for my patients either. Yes, like, to have boundaries, basically. I had to learn to have boundaries, because I would, you know, not, and then I would just get steamrolled or whatever, and I had to, and that's, boundaries are something, it's a huge thing to learn. And for a long time, because I've been like such a pleaser, I felt really mean putting, boundaries in. But it's actually unkind to have no boundaries, because that's when you just get pushed past your capacity. If you're me, you'll have a I think the kids are calling it a mentee bee these days. Is that right? I feel like I'm a bit old. And then no one's happy. So.
Well, I mean, I actually had that moment about a week or so ago. Most of my entire life I've always been a people pleaser. I always just want to make the people around me happy, and quite often I would be treated as a doormat, or people would not have enough respect for me because I'd let people disrespect me and not stand up for myself. And just recently I had to do that, and the moment I did it, when I was by myself and I was isolating myself a little bit, my brain was in that state of mind where it would overthink about all the times that I've let people get away with things, and my mind at the time was like, fuck you, I don't want to be this character you've created anymore. I can't do this anymore. We need to start setting some boundaries, and we need to start telling people I'm not tolerating this anymore. If you cross that boundary, well, I'm going to have to say something. I'm not going to allow it to happen anymore, and if you do it again, that's it.
I think that's the thing, and a lot of people confuse that with boundaries, is that you're not controlling people, telling them what to do. Boundaries are not about other people, they're about yourself. So, exactly like you said, if you do XYZ again, then I'm going to do X. So just so you know, and I've said that before in conversations, I'm not going to stay in this conversation if you start yelling.
Of course.
So if you, raise your voice at me again, or if you whatever, then I'm going to leave this conversation. And then the other thing that you need to do is actually follow through, because otherwise it's like kids, right? They'll push your boundaries, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And the more that you then give in, the quicker they're learning, or it doesn't matter whether it's kids or anyone. If you don't follow through with the boundaries, if you put something, you better be sure that you're willing to follow through with it, because if you don't, they know then you're full of shit.
Yeah.
Oh, they've said that, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like with my little sisters, they push my buttons all the time, and sometimes I'll be understanding and I'll let them get away with certain things, because it's like, well, I love you too much to want to yell. I don't want to get to that point. But the only times that I'm mostly strict and disciplined with them is when they disrespect their own sister. If they're doing something that's dangerous, then I'll say, no, do not ever do that again. I mean, with people in general, it's different, but with them, it's like, I don't know how they do it, but they've got me wrapped around their little fingers. I love them to death. And
how old are they?
The oldest is 8, turning 9 next year in Australia Day, and the youngest is turning 7 in November.
So they're similar age to my boys. Yeah. To discipline means to teach. A disciple, is a follower or a teacher. Are we looking to discipline them, like teach them, or are we looking to punish them? Okay, so let's say that most people don't want to punish their children; they want to what they call discipline. Okay, and this is something I've really had to think about with my parenting. Is okay, so how does their action, smacking them on the butt, teach them what I want them to learn? Like I'm asking you.
Well, for me, like being smacked on the ass as a kid, that taught me a bit of respect for my parents, especially when I was being disrespectful. Like whenever I was doing the wrong thing or being smart back to my parents, I'd get a small smack, but whenever I did a bad thing, the more of a harder smack it was.
The further you pull something back, and my parents who were boomers and generations before them, they behaved really well. They were, they got the strap or the cane in school, and corporal punishment was a real thing. My question to you, though, did you respect your parents more, or did you fear them that they could hurt you? So that's the thing that I talk to my kids about. It's just like, okay, yeah, kids were better behaved back in the day, but they were, trained, like a dog, I got so much reinforcement that this behavior gets, a punishment that you are trained to act a certain way of what your parents think, and obviously if there's something dangerous, that's different, but that could have been for all sorts of things, right? That they could have then decided that was a, appropriate punishment or discipline thing. But, or you just, are you behaving through fear or through respect? So I would yes, people do what they're told when they fear someone. I've had bosses that I will, they say jump, I say hi, because I'm scared of them. Did I respect them? Probably not. I would like my children to behave in ways, certain ways, because they have respect for me, not because they have fear. But fear teaches faster. And we do live in a world that has certain social rules, and so, these things exist. You can't say, just, be wild necessarily. Well, you can be, but you can't then be you can't maybe achieve the things you want to do in the world, the society you live in.
To a certain extent, of course, yeah.
But I mean, it is a fine balance, because as a parent, I'm a big believer in natural consequences. I want whatever the disciplinary action I want it to be related, like a natural consequence. And you're talking about you and your brothers fighting. My kids, this is lucky for me because I've got two boys. The younger one is way more fiery, and the older one is obviously bigger. So they balance out in terms of their wrestling. But yeah, I'll say to them, hey guys, whenever you do this, somebody gets hurt. Someone's going to get a foot in the face or something, So just so you know, if you carry on doing this, that's going to probably be the likely outcome. And I'm busy right now, so I can't break up fights or whatever. And I basically leave them to it to a certain extent. Ultimately, one of them will always come to me crying, and then I'll sit down and I'll be like, do you remember we talked about this? And it's a way slower way of them realizing natural consequences. Okay, I need to be more careful, or I need to whatever. I think for me, I want to raise my children, not train my children. I think that when you have a consequence that doesn't match the, the crime or whatever it is, then yes, you are going to train them to behave in a certain way, but it's not. Then you're always going to need something external and unrelevant to sort of get you to do something. Does that make sense? So I want them to sort of learn to, as much as possible, like you were talking about things that are dangerous, and also boundaries, with your sisters. Say they're in the park and one of them's doing something that is dangerous. I do a lot of choice theory with my kids. Okay. And so instead of saying, you do that and then this will happen or whatever, well, I'll say to them, hey Archie or Quinn, those are my boys, I don't want you up there again, because that's really dangerous. If you fall off, you break your neck, and I see. So if you choose to go up there again, knowing that I've told you you're not allowed, you're choosing to end the park visit and we're going home. And that's what I mean then about following through. So I haven't then been right, I'm going to do this. I'm because then, it happened with my youngest son the other day. I was reading a story in my bed with the boys, and my youngest was just full of energy, and the other one was just sitting listening. And the youngest was doing flips on my bed while I was trying to sit quietly and wind down for bed and read. I said to him, I gave him 2 chances. I said, look, we're having quiet time. We're sitting down now. We're listening to the book. If you don't want to do that, if you want to go jumping, you need to go to your bed and do it, because we're having wind down time. If you choose to do that again, you're choosing to leave the room with us. I'm going to shut the door, and you're going to miss out on the story, and you won't be able to sit with us. Okay, so ultimately, because he's 6 years old and wild, did it again. And I had to then follow through. I was just I'm really sorry you made that choice. Because I'm not punishing him. He chose that. I said, these are choices. If you choose this is what will happen. And so then when it happened, I'm really sorry you made that choice. I wanted you to be here and share this with us, but you made that choice. So
the hardest thing for me is that whenever I take them anywhere, they want chocolates or lollies, and I'm like, no, you cannot have that. That is not food. We are getting food, and we will get a chocolate for afterwards if you behave yourself. But I will not get you a chocolate if you don't, if you keep misbehaving. Mm-hmm. And I try and use that psychology side of things, but I've often found the girls get a bit upset when I basically tell them no, but I need them to understand in a matter of speaking, when it comes to me, you may get looked after, but I'm not going to spoil you with toys that you only play with once and then it'll be left in a box for 2-3 years and not be touched again.
Yeah,
and
I'm glad it's not just my kids.
No.
Like, there's a few interesting things in that though. Like, one is, well, I've learned to give my kids a budget. Whenever we go anywhere, we do a little bit of like pocket money now, but it's like, okay, here's some savings for a month and for the school holidays or something. I tried doing stuff but they were just awful with it. So now wherever we go somewhere, they learn, hey mum, what's my budget? And sometimes that's zero. We've come to Coles, we're getting milk and bread and we're going home. Sometimes that's like, okay, you've got $1 if these things happen in the shops or whatever.
So you cut it down.
And so, or maybe we go to Kmart and I'm like, because that was the thing, like, he kept just wanting him crap. The other thing that is a really interesting lesson, especially with you going into like entrepreneur and all that sort of thing, is we can learn a lot with how relentless children are for asking for what they want repeatedly, hearing no and still persevering. I'm like, when did we stop? When did we stop doing that? Because every parent or anyone who knows any kids is like, you tell a kid no and they will just keep on. But at some point, it gets really hard to ask for things and we get really scared of hearing no. Kids don't even think about it. No, I'll just ask again, or I'll negotiate all that. But at some point, not for everybody, for a lot of people though, that fear of rejection or hearing no is huge.
I mean, I think that's something I never really actually really analysed closely. Like, I used to ask all the time, and then all of a sudden I just stopped at some point, and I can't remember the exact point, but then there was always that I don't want to ask because I always get told no. And it's even till this year, like, I would often think like, I want to do this but I don't want to ask because I usually get told no. And that's where I've had to constantly remind myself, like, you never know, mate. Like, stop thinking that way.
It's a no if you don't. It's an automatic no if you don't ask.
Exactly.
And so you're already there. You've already got the no if you say nothing. So then what's stopping you? Okay, are you feeling embarrassed? Are you feeling like, are you most of the time when I think adults want to ask something and they don't, is because they're scared of being judged.
Yeah, most definitely.
People are going to judge you, it doesn't matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
People judge you regardless, so you may as well do what you want.
Very true. Very true.
Because they're judging you anyway. But yeah, being seen, and putting stuff like this out and being like, okay, I'm here, I've been seen, and just sitting with like that uncomfortableness often it's a learning curve too.
That's also something I've had to accept, is that doing this kind of a business and this kind of a lifestyle, I do understand the fundamental facts that doing something like this is putting yourself out there, and you're going to be judged regardless of how nice of a person you are, what you say, what you do, your past. Anyone will try and trigger you any way they can, but that's the thing I've learned with training my mind, is that it only will bring me down if I allow it, because at the end of the day it's just words. It only has power if you give it to it, and you've just got to overcome that mindset that you used to have and just keep that mindset that you've now got, where no matter what life throws at me, no matter what people think of me, this is what I want to do and I'm going to go for it whether people like it or not. But along the process I've had to realise I've still got to somewhat care what people think, because in a way, because they'll be giving me some ways of bettering myself as well, like giving me a different perspective. Like, I liked the show, but could you talk about these particular topics as well?
But being open to constructive criticism and to help you grow is very different from just being caring what people think. Like, those are two different things. Caring what people think. There's I had to do this exercise once, and it was like interesting looking at all the comments. And it was a video of Elvis right toward the end, before he died, where he'd gotten, put on a lot of weight and he'd been taking lots of drugs and he was really messy and he, was playing and he was slurring and falls over a bit. And then some of his vocals are like really good. And there was a thing, and it was like, okay, well, tell me what you think. And half of the people were like, Elvis is a legend, he's a king, his voice is amazing, because I think a lot of people probably agree with that. It's Elvis. And then the other half of the people would be like, oh gosh, look how fat he got, or God has, he's slurring his words, he's lost it, he's, really negative stuff. And I'm like, well, this guy's been dead how long?
Yeah.
Decades and decades? I don't know, 40 years? I don't know how long Elvis has been dead. A long, long time.
Yeah.
And you still got people on the internet
Still hating on him.
loving you and hating you. And you're Elvis.
Yeah.
And you're long dead. So, no, you haven't got much chance for the rest of us people to put their things out there. And
Well, I think that's exactly one of the reasons why a lot of people don't go for what they want, because they look at all the negative things down the road rather than, why shouldn't I do this? Why shouldn't I pursue what I'm after? Just because of these negative things doesn't mean it's going to happen. These 10 positive things could happen. And I mean, that's how I've been trying to approach it, is like, rather than thinking of the 10 negative things of why not to do this, I've thought of the 10 positive reasons why to do this. And I've talked to a lot of people about it, and I honestly expected a lot of criticism and a lot of, oh, don't do that, mate, you can't do that. Rather than being criticised, they actually told me it's good of you to try and do something like that, because if, like, for example, a lot of men that I know, they pointed out that if you were to talk to every other man in this pub, 99% of them have probably got mental trauma from their past, or they're dealing with some kind of pain.
there's all sorts of generational trauma, all of it.
I've realised it's just not just with men, but it's with everyone. We've all got problems in life that sometimes we don't even know how to deal with, we don't know how to process it or let go. And I think that's the big problem with a lot of people, is they don't know how to let go of something that's really hurt them. And I think the reason why they're always in that state of mind is because they're constantly living on that time period where they got hurt. And until you learn to let go of that pain and learn from the lesson, you won't truly be able to move forward.
I think I think men actually really have a bit of a hard time at the moment, because I think the way that women are raised in terms of to be more open and sharing and community and the sisterhood, that's still there, whereas
Men don't have that.
men, yes, you might have your bros and your mates and things like that, but you're also very much taught to don't whinge, don't keep it to yourself, harden up, be this, that, and the next thing. I'm a real big believer that if things, and it doesn't matter how you want to process something but if you keep whatever it is all inside you always and don't process it, that you end up sick. You end up either physically sick, mentally sick. It just builds up until one day, exactly. And I think at least with women, whether that's like talking it out or whatever the process is, it needs to be there. But I think for women, a lot of it is, sharing and, sharing experiences and being able to actually, get that out. And I think that men struggle with really having more relationships like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I find that a lot of men feel like that same mentality. Well, why should I talk about it? No one gives a shit. Like, that's their mentality. That's what I used to think. Like, I used to think, why would I even bother talking anymore? Because no one cares. And you kind of actually convince yourself that no one cares, rather than actually looking at the people around you, and you just think, I don't care if people think I'm weak anymore. Like, I need to get this out of my system. I can't keep burying it, because I know for a fact people that bury their pain constantly, they may get through for a little while, but a majority of them end up killing themselves. And I've had that fair share of experiences. And it's funny how that a lot of people that are the most happy, or seem the most happiest, are actually often the ones that are best at hiding their pain. And just because they've got a smile on their face doesn't mean they're truly happy. They're just good at masking what they've been through.
You're putting on a mask, going out, getting on with it, and going home and you know. And I sort of like talked about that like with dentistry, you know. And I joke now because, you know, people are like, oh, you're a sadist. I was like, I wish I was, because then I wouldn't go home and cry and drink. No, I'm joking. I don't go home and cry and drink. But I kind of used to. Like, you know, when I said, like, when things were really bad, like, I would get home and be like, oh, my God, I need a wine. Okay, so, like, okay, straight into a, you know, very accepted in Australia after a long day of work, I need a drink. But is that really, like, one that's a very awful way of processing your day or, you know, the stuff. But I don't even know what my point was. We were talking about,
It's like masking.
yeah, like masking. And that was because I was putting on, it was, you know, it's like putting on a play. Like, I was like, I put on this dentist, you know, persona, and in which, like, I don't do any of that anymore. One, I don't feel like I need to, and two, I just don't really drink anymore because I just don't. Yeah, and that's a lot because a lot of the friends that I associate with now, just that's not our main form of catching up, is going out and partying or getting drunk or whatever, which I did all through my 20s, you know. So, yeah.
So it's all about, like, I mean, for me, I find that certain things like that, it's okay on a not a regular basis, but like on a one day a week kind of thing, where you have a day with your friends and catch up for a couple of drinks and just have a couple of laughs, because you need that bit of social interaction in your life, otherwise you just feel too isolated.
100%.
But I feel like whenever I'm not with my friends, I don't need that drink, even if I'm going through crap. Like, I just find healthier ways now to process what's going on in my life, and I've often found physical exercise is the best way for me, because the amount of times I've gone to the gym or before I go to the run, I've found like I'm stressed or frustrated or angry before, but when I'm done, I just feel a lot better mentally, even though my body's hurting from the run or the workout. The mind is so much better because I'm not focusing so much on what happened to me that made me feel this way. I'm more focused on the physical pain that I just put myself through. But it's funny because, like, when I'm focusing on that and focusing on the fact that, oh, look, I've just done something that makes me feel good, I no longer feel that negative emotion that I was feeling prior. And it's hard to explain, but for me it's just like whenever I'm feeling stressed or frustrated, doing something physical for me gives me a bit more self-respect, and have a bit more respect for myself, because I'm not a lazy piece of shit. I'm actually trying something that's good for me, and I'm trying to work on my mental health. And I usually use a lot of the anger and frustration in my exercise, and I think that's what makes me feel better. Like when I feel like, oh, I'm tired, I'll stop. I'll think to myself, well, do you feel mentally better? No. Keep pushing until you can't keep going. And I'll use that emotion as fuel to just go, nah, I'm pissed off, I want to keep going, I'll keep going. And I just keep pushing myself to the point where I feel like that emotion's now gone, and I feel like, yes, like I pushed myself past the limit, I broke a record, or it's something where it's like it feels good to be able to push past limits that you couldn't do prior when you first started. You just got to keep building and keep building and keep working at it until I get to my ultimate goal, which is going to take some time, but I want to eventually get to like 20Ks, then 30Ks, and then ultimately my goal is to try and get 50K run one day.
Amazing.
But it's going to take years, just like with the gym.
I don't know though, like I ran a half marathon. I've done one half marathon and I did a 20-kilometre tough mudder.
Wow.
I think I did a 17-kilometre one as well.
But did you feel like that sense of like accomplishment that not a lot of people can feel, because not many people actually are capable of doing that at the time, but little do they realise if you put the energy, the time and effort into it, you can achieve that. It's like with anything in this world, if you put that time and energy into it and you put your mind to it mostly, like if you believe you can do it and you keep telling yourself, I can do this, rather than that negative self-doubt, I often find like that's what limits us the most, is our mindset. Like if we keep saying, oh, I'm not strong enough, I'm not enough, I can't do this, I'm just, it's not my thing, you're basically convincing your brain you aren't.
Well, that's what I mean, like, like, one, celebrating it, but also, like, all of that is, like, proof, like, to every, like, judgment you have on yourself, like, exactly. Something I do, I'm like, and to be fair, I'm much more of someone who's great at starting things. Finishing things is not my my strength. But sometimes I'll be like, there's me, like, I'll never finish anything. Every time I hear myself, like, say something like that, like, I'll never finish anything, I'm like, okay, this is a belief that I obviously have about myself, which is bullshit, because you finished the cake you were baking yesterday, or you finished putting the dishwasher away, you're like, unpacking the dishwasher. And I know that kind of sounds comical, but like, whenever you hear like negative things, like coming back to something to contradict them, because that's the thing, I'll ask myself sometimes, like, is this really true, or am I just making this up? Because most of the time you're just making it up. But was you asking about when I did the half marathon, who is it? There's a guy, Jim Fortin, he's a podcast which I quite like, and I've done one of his courses, and one thing he says, which I think is true, is how you do something is how you do everything. So you asked me about like the half marathon. How I did that, I was just, because I was thinking about it, I was like, that's kind of how I do everything. Which was super excited at the start, went for a bunch of runs, lost the dopamine or the excitement effect, went into a bit of a thing where I didn't run at all for a bit. The date's coming, I think, better go on a few more runs. And I think the longest run I went on before the day, before the day of the marathon, I think was like 12 kilometers. So 9 and a bit under what I was going to have to do. And then did I just go, oh no, I'm not going to, do it or show up or whatever? I'm like, no, I'll just figure it out on the day, which is exactly what I did. And I ran it in 2 hours 15, and I absolutely stuffed my ankles just from the repeated, because I hadn't actually strengthened my body enough to withstand that like joint strain. But I was like, well, there you go, I did it. And that's, I say how you do something is how you do everything. It's pretty much how I approach most things, And I've always been lucky enough to, well, I don't know, maybe I've just proved to myself enough times that I'll figure things out when I'm there and on the day, and doesn't matter what happens, it'll be fine.
So I think that's part of with how important it is for you to have a positive mindset when you're attacking anything, because nothing positive will come from a negative mindset. And that's what I constantly have to keep telling myself, like, it's so vital when you're attacking anything in life. If you don't have that positive mindset, you're stuffed already. Like, you're going to be failing because you're not seeing the big picture. You're not believing in yourself. You're just doubting yourself, and that's when failure will occur. But if you remove that fear, I find, and you just truly have that unshakable belief in yourself, like, I can do this no matter what. Nothing's going to stop me. You'll have a much better chance of attacking whatever it is you're attacking than with a negative, doubtful mindset. So I mean, it's funny how so many people with a negative mindset complain but don't look for solutions. And it's like, well, if you would really understand how the mind works, our mind is our biggest barrier, like, without a doubt. I mean, my mind used to be my worst enemy. I used to have the worst thought process in my life, like, for a long period of time, and it took months for me to train my mind to think differently, to feel differently, and it was a difficult process, and it has taken time. And I still, every now and then, I have my negative thoughts, but then I come up with a kind of a solution where as soon as a negative thought comes in, it's like, no, don't want to, get rid of it, change it, and I'll replace it with something positive. And it's a process of elimination. Like, I've got to constantly keep being more aware of my thoughts.
But it's the thing, you need to have the awareness first, because a lot of you probably never were aware that was even happening. So becoming aware, you can't make change unless you actually or have that awareness of what's actually going on. It's funny you said, about like, nope, stop it, like, try that out. There's a skit, It's Bert Newton on YouTube, and he's playing like a psychologist, and you should watch it. It's actually quite funny. But it's basically she goes through all her problems, and then he's like, okay, and he's highly recommended apparently, and he's just like, stop it. And and she's like, but I've got blah blah blah, and he's like, stop it. And it's funny because it's it's like a skit, like comedy, but the amount of times I've found myself when I get into like this spiral of anxious thoughts about whatever might be going on at the time, I literally, just like, Megan, stop it, and I visualize Bert Newton just being like, stop it. And that usually is enough to just like, because you can't simultaneously hold two different thoughts at the same time. So it doesn't matter if you are like, oh, I'll change it to something positive. Yeah, that's good. But honestly, you could be like, I'm going to think about an apple. You literally could think about anything. It doesn't need to be anything particular, but you could think about, when was, Madonna born? I don't know. Like,
you change it to anything as long as it's not that negative.
As long as you're not going down this thing. And then your brain will go back to it, stop it. Or like, it doesn't matter what you're changing it to. And it's practice. And it's like anything, the more you do it, the more it becomes an unconscious behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, I've often constantly had to keep reevaluating my mind because it constantly drifts off into daydreams or thinks about what's going to happen in the future, and I have to constantly remind myself, like, stop thinking about the future, stop thinking about the past, just be in the moment and think about what you can do today that will make tomorrow a bit easier, but then have that same mindset again tomorrow where I've got these things I need to do, I'm going to focus on these, and that's it. I'm going to just take step by step. I know where I want to be, but I'm not going to stress about it because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Well, it's just a waste of time and energy, isn't it?
Exactly.
Like, that's not helpful at all.
Yeah. Like, for example, there was a quote that I heard recently, and I can't remember the title of the book, but it was a book that had a quote in there, and a boy was talking with a horse, and they were in a very misty forest, and the boy said to the horse, I can't see a way through, and the horse replied, can you see your next step? And he said yes, and he said, well, then just take that. Yeah. And that's something that I've had to really adapt, because it's like sometimes
the next right thing?
it's like we get stuck in this lifestyle where we got to think of the future, but I can't see how I'm going to get there. But it's like, well, don't stress, just take your next step.
Well, and that's the thing, if you want to get like metaphysical on it, I mean, it's the Manifesta podcast, so I'm assuming we can go there, but like people are like, it's alright, and you get people on the other side being like, the universe has got my back. The universe will support you supporting yourself, so, and like I said about, quitting dentistry, you've got to invest, you've got to have some skin in the game, and you kind of got to be like with the universe as well and be like, okay, I've showed up. And then I feel like things back you up. But if you don't then, if you don't make that step and show up for yourself, the rest of that support won't come, like...
Yeah, it's like you got to constantly just keep showing up for yourself every day and just put that effort in. Because unfortunately, if you don't, who else will?
The other thing though is also really giving yourself permission, and I don't know if this has been a struggle for you, because I can feel like, you're like, I need to do, is really realising that you need to take time to really rest, like, and properly rest, and also, one big thing that has had probably one of the biggest impacts in my life is creating just to create, so not making it like, it doesn't matter what it is, I'm making this for like a purpose necessarily, just for creation's sake and being in that flow. And also just, prioritizing like pleasure in my life, however that may look. It may look like, instead of, I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to exercise because I want to, I don't know, whatever, yeah, that's great. But also just being like, I'm going to go for a walk in nature and I'm going to go barefoot and I'm going to literally just like wander and meander and like look at the flowers and feel this, like actually take a moment and feel like the sun on my skin and like take like presence with like how things feel and smell and taste and look. Because I feel like a lot of the time we're so like going and achieving and goal oriented
Very
that
true.
we miss like being able to, you know, like
Enjoy
the
blessings.
like pleasure, like, and for me to like get into like that thing, I had to really change like little things. And I did some work with some women for a few years, and then I got a wee bit caught up because Facebook was being annoying. But because they're like, oh, I'm too busy for, you know, this stuff, because everyone's so busy all the time, right? It's like a badge of honor how busy you are. I said, okay, well, like, and this is with women, like, do you have a shower every day, or do you, you know, moisturize your legs or whatever? And I was just like, look, today when you're in the shower, like, just, you know, light a scented candle and like just take a moment instead of being like, I'm in here, I've got to wash my hair, I've got to, you know, and just slow and just be like, what does the water feel like on my skin? And like find the, you know, it's like mindfulness but with like pleasure seeking things, purely because I don't think we stopped to freaking smell the roses properly. Like, what is this life? Like, when you have a goal and when you're striving for something, you sometimes forget that you're actually in your life right now. This is still your life right now, this day. This is part of it. Like, yes, okay, this is where you want to head, but don't lose
sight of the now.
Where are you right now? Like, right now I'm here, I'm having a cool chat with you, this is fun. I'm asking that because, watching my words has been a really thing as well, and just being like, okay, like I speak my life into existence. Do I want to speak, like really watching what I put out?
True.
And so being like, you know what, this is going to be a really, fun challenge. I'm going to really enjoy this. It's all going to flow.
Yeah.
And then just stop. You don't have to be then, and then if it doesn't, then I'll, one, you can deal with it in the moment, and two, don't foreshadow something as being challenging or hard when it might not be. Like, I might have done that doing the half marathon because I had not trained enough, but I was just like, oh well, let's go. Well, so I think we can look right back to the Australian motto of "She'll be right."
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we've lost that over the years, because having like a "she'll be right" attitude to things means that you actually get stuff done, and everything pretty much is right. I'm talking about this. If you wait till something's perfect, or and I'll challenge you when you're editing this, don't fuss over it.
Yeah.
Just put it out. Be like, okay, I'm going to do it for X amount of time, and check it up.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be perfect.
Just do the best you can with what you got.
Because that's the thing, like, with this podcast, literally, if something that I said or you said in this thing, someone hears it and something clicks, because that's happened with me. Like, I'm like, oh, I sort of read that or I heard this, but when that person said that, even though I've heard it before, I just was like, oh my god, I actually light bulb, finally sunk in. And it may have just been I was, in a place to hear it and absorb it properly, or they might have said it in a way that my brain was like, about.
Well, I mean, I must admit that I talk about like children, because I think a lot of new parents out there are struggling on what to do, how to raise their child, and I must admit, being with my little sisters, whenever I'm with them, I learn something new every day when I'm with them, and I learn, okay, that worked out better than I thought it did. Like, it was difficult to say no, or basically tell them all the time no, but it's like, I'm sorry that you're sad, sweetie, I'm sorry that I'm telling you no, but you can't always get what you want in life by just nagging, because you'll frustrate people around you. Like, if you really want something, you've got to understand, especially at the value of money in that nowadays. If you want a brand new car, you can't just get it by asking for it.
That's something I'm trying to teach my kids, is the value of money, because
I think it's very difficult for a child to understand the concept of money.
But I'm trying to, and that's like, how I said, like, I tell them a budget. Because then, like, they can then be like, oh, well, this is X amount. Or like, okay, so my youngest had $19 in his bank account. And he had been actually really wanting a guitar. And we were in Kmart and there was a guitar and it was $25. I was like, well, you've only got $19. He's like, oh. And so the other thing I'm trying to teach them is to be resourceful. I was just like, okay, you need $6. How can you be resourceful? How can you make this happen? And he's like, okay. He's like, well, will you give me a loan and I will unpack the dishwasher every day this week? And I'm like, yep, we can do this. And because teaching like that resourcefulness, okay, I want this, but I don't currently have the resources to get it, whatever it is. How can I be resourceful? How can I, what do you want? And whether that's raising money for something, whether that's, because always figure out how to make something happen. Like nothing is impossible.
Exactly.
Like there's things that, I've done, I'm like, look back and I was like, how did I even like make that happen? And I just don't know, like, I guess that's why I'm trying to teach the kids now, because the more that nurture their brains to like go to that, okay, this is out of my reach, how can, instead of just being like, oh no, I'm gonna just sit here and moan about it.
Yeah.
I want it to become like a second nature, like such a unconscious habit of going, okay, I want this, I don't have the money or whatever it is to get it, just automatically going to, okay, how can I make that happen? Yeah, so I'll say to the kids, if they wanted to raise money for something, we baked cookies and we just like walked along the neighbourhood and the neighbours bought these cookies, or like they sold some of their old stuff on, like I said, okay, what's some of the stuff that you don't use anymore that's actually still good, that you haven't broken, that you could sell? What don't you play with anymore? Because then someone else will get a good deal, they might like it, and you get whatever money.
Yeah.
But they set up a little shop at the end of my driveway, and then they try to sell like used glow sticks for $100 each. I'm like, you also have to understand market value of things, darlings.
Yeah.
Because
Clever, but
you ain't going to make any money
No.
if you're trying to charge $100 for a used glow stick. No
No.
one's going to buy it. Oh, I was like, would you buy it? They're like, no. I'm like,
there you go.
there you go.
So it's really trying to open their perspective on things in just a clear but direct way, where it's like, no, I know you're trying to make money, mate, but charging people that kind of money for something that's been used that you would not buy.
But also like letting them learn stuff, because they went out and they're at the end of it. I live in a cul-de-sac, so there's not really a lot of people coming down anyway. But I didn't say that to them straight away, they came in and complained that no one was buying anything, and I was like, okay, well, what have you got available to buy, and what's your prices like? And they told me, and I was like, well, the fact that you haven't had any customers, what does that tell you about? And this is important for entrepreneurs. What does that tell you about your product and your price? Because if you've got a really good product at the right price, you're going to sell stuff. And it's interesting, like with price, pricing's got a lot of psychology attached to it as well. Like the whole, I think this, because this is more expensive, I think this must be better, when, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, like.
You never know.
But, I don't know what your future plans are, but, pricing yourself at a, like whatever you're going to be doing, at a point where people need to know, like feel something's got value. But then for that to happen, you need to make sure that you feel that what you're selling has value.
Yeah. You're talking about your own experiences that have helped you through some difficult times as well. And I mean, it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes throughout life, but that's the point of life. You've got to make mistakes, otherwise you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow. And I think a lot of us dwell on our mistakes rather than learning from it and moving forward. And it's like, it's okay. You messed up, learn from it, keep going. Like, don't let your mistakes ruin the rest of your life when you've got so much ahead of you. Like, learn from it, keep going, don't dwell. Because that's what I used to do, and it wasn't until I finally learned to let go of the past and say to myself, all right, I'm starting fresh, I'm starting a new chapter, I'm going to make this the best chapter I can. And it's all about just that process of learn, don't forget, but move forward. Like, don't let it control you for the rest of your life as you go. Just make sure you don't make the same mistakes.
Because that's the thing, you hold like certain beliefs, because then you're like, oh, when I did this happened, so that must mean, so essentially you're like, this is what happened, so this is what I've, interpreted, and then so this is the belief. But it's like, okay, yes, okay, that might be what had happened, but the interpretation I gave to it, I literally made that up. So if I can call bullshit on that, then that will then change my belief that I hold. So, because we always make interpretations, someone cuts you off in traffic and you might say, oh, that awful driver, they weren't watching, or they might have been on their phone, or, they're just, an asshole driver, right? So those are the interpretations you've made, and you've made then a judgment on them. But then it's like, okay, well, what if you had the information that there was a woman in the back seat, like, basically pushing out a baby, and they were rushing to hospital, and that's why they cut you off? Well, you would make different interpretations. You'd be like, oh my gosh, that's a father who's so stressed, his wife's having the baby in the back seat. Like, you wouldn't then be like, oh, they're an asshole or they're this. You then make a different judgment. So that's the other thing when things happen is, okay, what was another way that I could interpret what happened that's actually beneficial for me? And like sometimes you got to go through a few. You're like, oh, because you tell yourself a story. Oh, they said this to me because this or that, and you're like, oh, I'm actually making this up. So what can I make up that's supportive of me, rather that will lead me to hold a belief that is positive rather than a belief that is negative, because most of the shit we believe about ourselves we've literally made up in our heads.
Well, I mean, I often find that you can never really truly understand like someone else's situation unless you've been through it yourself. And if you haven't been through it, you can listen and understand what they're going through, but you don't actually feel the emotions that they've gone through. You can only imagine so much, and unless you're a true empath who understands facial expression and you can actually feel their energy, like a lot of people don't have that ability, where a lot of people just go, no, don't want anything to do with that. But with me, like whenever I feel like people are going through some traumatic experience, if it's not in a bad, like for example, like if it's a situation where they just want to talk, they don't want anything from you, they just want to talk about what they've been through, I'm more than happy to sit and listen. It's when people are like putting their problems onto me and saying like, how do I solve this? Like, can you do it for me?
And they're a drain.
Yeah,
they're draining.
There's a difference between like...
It's called an energy vampire. Yeah. There's a book, Dodging Energy Vampires.
Yeah.
I think you should read it.
I probably should. But like, I find there's a difference between someone who's going through a traumatic experience and just wants advice, and someone who just wants to complain.
Well, that's like I said to you, like I have very different relationships and friends now when I'm like, are you enhancing, my life or whatever? And that... So now I have, and I try to be this person too. Sometimes I'm better at than others, and I'm sure that's the same. But like, I have friends now, and I have far fewer of them than I used to have when I was in my 20s. Yeah. But they're very connected, and they'll say to me, "Hey, I'm going through XYZ right now. Do you have the capacity? Can you hold space for me to help process this?" They'll ask me permission, but they won't just dump all their stuff on me, no matter what might be going on for me or whatever. And so, like, getting into that habit and me being able to be like, hey, I have the capacity for to listen and hold space on a phone call right now, or hey, send me an audio note because I'm whatever, or I'm busy free later. Like, also knowing where your boundaries are, because if you just keep saying yes, 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 you will grow. And so checking in with yourself, okay, what is my capacity? Yeah, I can get on the phone, or hey, no, I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to drive an hour up to you right now because I have that capacity and your need is great. So it's about, you were saying about having friendships like that.
It's all about learning how to help, but not drain yourself to that point where you've got no more energy for yourself later on.
Well, that's the thing, like, when you start to go and grow and things like that, the people in your life, they're either going to come and grow with you, or they're going to drag you back down. And that's when you need to have lots of really good boundaries over, relationships, especially with family, because, I found a lot of, when I started doing stuff, a lot of my friendships and things fell away. And they're just like a natural sort of thing, they heard less to talk about, and but also having more boundaries with like family. Like, I'm not gonna just stop. Relationships with like your family don't just generally fall away. They're usually a conscious decision whether to be in contact with family members or not. But also having them boundaries. Okay, these are topics that I will discuss, and some things were just like, this never goes well and these are off the table. So creating the boundaries for what that relationship looks like.
Because I think without boundaries, that's another reason why a lot of people get into bad mental states, is because they didn't have boundaries, but they didn't realise boundaries are so important, because it's not only teaching people that I have enough respect for myself and I will care for you and I'll be there for you, but I can only do it to this extent because I've done this before. I've been a people pleaser. I've put everything I've had into some people and I've gotten nothing in return. So unfortunately I've had to teach myself these boundaries, and if you can't respect that, unfortunately I can't stay with you as a friend or a partner. Like
No, but that is okay, like, this is what's happened, this is the impact it has, and this is so important to me that if you choose to cross that line again, then I'm going to have to choose to no longer be in relationship with you, or whether that's, hey, I'm going to need to take some space to reevaluate it. It doesn't matter what it is, but yeah, having okay, this is what's going to happen if you choose this, because then it's not, you've XYZ, or you've, like, it's like when we went back to like choice stuff with kids. You made that choice, and I told you before you made it what I was going to do if you did. You can't then come back on me and be like, oh, you're losing your shit, or I didn't, like, that was really clear. Yeah. Like, that's, love Brené Brown, being unclear is being unkind, which I totally get. And it is tricky, like, especially women, like I talked about this, we're not taught to be direct, and I've gotten in trouble like with work in the past for, being bossy or being, this, and I hate vagueness or anything passive aggressive or anything like that. So, but I feel like often when men are direct, they're seen as being assertive. When women are direct, you can often be seen as being a bitch, which annoys the shit out of me, because I'll always say, hey, look, if I'm being, really direct and like this, sometimes I'm just in that zone, and like I'm just like, boom, and that's
your process.
It depends on, what's going on, but no one should ever wonder, like, if I bothered them, or, I was feeling some tension because just different working. I do some stuff that there's some overlap in roles, basically, and some of the stuff I'm used to doing. So it was some of, like the administration side. And so we were kind of clashing, because she was like, well, but I do this, and I'm like, but I, like, it's sort of just more in like handing over and organising the next steps and stuff. But I was like, I was feeling a little bit like of just a little bit of tension. So I'm not just going to let that necessarily sit there, because I don't like feeling that. I was just like, hey, like, I'm sensing this. Like, are you open to having a chat about it so that we can both feel, and which is what we did. And we're like, cool bananas. That was great.
I must admit, I've still got a lot of learning to do when it comes to relationships and communication, and I'm willing to put that work. I'm willing to put the work in, but it's difficult to find somebody that is willing to put the same amount of effort in. I tend to be the one that makes a lot of the work, but whenever I need anything, I don't often get that effort reciprocated. And
any emotion, like, people are like, oh, that it's anger's a negative. Every emotion is literally a message, and for you to pay attention to. It's the behaviour that is what's important, So take anger, okay. It's because my younger son, he tends to go to anger, and I'm like, okay, so this is giving you a message that something's not sitting right with you. What's a healthy way that you can process this, And like when you're talking about moving, like emotion, it's like energy in motion, and like I said before, you need to try and like process, like let that out. I think, I don't know if I said this to you when I saw you the other week, was like an animal, if they go, because you're saying change your mindset, but also changing like your brain as well, like biologically, because we're an animal like anyone else, and our whole point is to go through puberty, procreate, keep the species alive. Yeah. Your brain, your amygdala, like your most primitive part of your brain, the survival, fight, flight, it doesn't care about you being happy. It will do whatever it takes so that you survive, and it will latch on, it will remember traumas to respond and go and trigger that nervous system. again, it doesn't give a shit if you're happy, that part of your brain. It just wants you to just keep living to the next day. But, you know, there's lots of people who've got lots of things on and everyone's busy, and there's lots of things that they feel like they can't get rid of in their life to reduce their stress. But you need to separate things that are causing like stress, like stressors, versus the stress itself.
Yeah.
And if an animal gets like chased by a lion, you know, an antelope gets chased by a lion or something like that, and then if they get away, like they need that fight flight to get away from this danger, otherwise they're going to be dead. If they get eaten, well, then that's over. It's over for them. But if they get away, you'll see, and they'll shake, and they'll shake and shake and shake and shake and shake, and let all of that basically energy from that fight flight being thing, so that loop gets closed, and then they're just like, okay again. But doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat, because it's such an old part of the brain that it doesn't think, it just like reacts. So if you're stuck in this loop and you don't close this thing by like some sort of process, and I think movement of some description, whether that's exercise or dancing it out or putting on a rage song and smashing pillows on your bed, I don't know, like physically letting that out, it gets stuck in you, and then it gets triggered more easily, that sympathetic nervous system.
Well, I mean, I've often heard this same saying over and over again on social media, where a lot of different entrepreneurs all say that your mind has to be stronger than your emotions.
If your emotions control you, it's just chaos. And I am someone who's highly emotional, can be highly chaotic at times.
We all can.
But, you know, it's all about sort of keeping recentering yourself, because, you know, we're talking about like habits and relationships, and I've had the same, we're talking about patterns. It's like, you know, being pleaser or whatever, it's just like, not one thing often seems like a big deal. It's like, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, and you're like, the dial's going, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, until you're so far, after however long, from where you want to be or how you wanted something to look, that, you know, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts or whatever they say. So you get, so, you know, you've like turned around, you're like, how did my life end up like this? And what my pattern has been to let it get to a certain threshold, and then then it's beyond saving, and then I slam my hand down on the, you know, burn it all down button or self-destruct and start again, and then, you know, feel like, oh, well, that didn't work, now I need to like go this way. But what I've realized is that's why it's important to like keep checking in. Okay, am I still aligned? Am I still aligned? Because even if I don't need to do a 180, but if I've been like 1 degree off, but I've been going like that 1 degree off for 10 years, yeah, I'm far away from where I thought of, but I was, if I had have checked in, you know, like, I don't know, I don't do hiking or compassing, but, you know, I feel like you need to have constant check-ins to check that you're on the track you want, because you don't want to, you know, get off and be like, oh shit, I'm in Antarctica, I thought we were going to, you know, Hawaii or something, you know. So
it's constantly like, I think you're trying to say is that you've just got to be constantly self-aware of what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you're feeling.
Oh, okay. What is, you know, checking in? Is this feeling right for me? Am I on the track I intended to be on? Because sometimes you can get on a path and then you're like, oh shit, this is one that wasn't even aligned. I just, you know, went along the road of least resistance or whatever, and everything seemed like, oh, that sounds like a good idea, or that sounds fine, and then all of a sudden,
I think that's one important thing with having goals is like you need to know where you're heading, because if you don't know where you want to be, you'll never get there. And it's like a ship with no destination. You're just drifting around, and unless you actually have an idea of where you want to be, then you need to start developing most of your spare time in the execution of getting to that destination. And I find a lot of people don't have goals. They'll say to themselves, I want to do this, but what actions are they doing to actually get to that point where it's all just wish fulfillment? Like they wish they could do it, they wish they could be this person, or wish, and it's like, well, are you doing, like, if you can imagine yourself as that person in that position, what habits would they be doing, and how would they think and feel, and how different is that to who you are now? And if it's a completely different person, then you have to understand you have to change who you are in order to be that person.
Well, you have to be like, okay, yeah, if this was already true, what would I be, you know, how would I be showing up? If this was already true, you know, you've got to have, you know, already invest and show up like it is, and then I feel like everything helps support you becoming becoming into that.
Well, I find the how-to sometimes isn't always how you expect it to be. Like,
well, it
happens for you, but it's not necessarily in ways that you'll ever expect. It'll just happen. Like, you'll have this plan in your head, like, this is how it's going to go, and then life gets in the way. But if you keep pursuing it, I feel like it's going to happen in a way that you just cannot predict. Like, that's the thing about life that I've found, is that you can have all these plans of what you want to do and where you want to be, but plans change. Like, for example, when I first came up with my logo, it was originally going to be a clothing line, and I was going to do a clothing line. But then...
Maybe still will?
Yeah, and I will do eventually. But then I had that idea where, like, I had the lady who helped me, a lovely girl that actually did my logo for me, because I drew it up and then she did it online.
That's great.
She sent me another idea that was very good, but I thought to myself, I can use that for a podcast. And when she said, like, oh, well, I know how to do that kind of side of things and I can give you some tips and guidance on that, it kind of gave me that click in my brain, because for a while now I've wanted to do this podcast type of thing, but I just had no idea of how I was going to get there or when, or the whole process of it all was actually quite overwhelming, and it was a bad time for me to even do it when I originally wanted to do it, because I didn't even know what kind of podcast I was going to do. I didn't know, like, how I was going to create an idea for the name or the logo. But then it's all kind of happened for me in a time where I actually put the time and effort into myself and just did this healing journey. And then the idea just came to me one day. Like, it happened, and it's like, oh, I like this idea, I want to pursue this, but how am I going to get there? And then I started meeting people that happen to just know exactly these types of circumstances, and gave me tips and advice on how to proceed with that. And it's funny how when you have a goal and you're actually putting the time and energy into yourself and actually go, I need to look for answers. It's funny how the answers sometimes seem to come to you when you are most looking for it.
Well, and that's the thing I said to you before about, like, watching your words. Like, your words have power. Like, you spoke this into existence, because if you hadn't have said the podcast thing, that might have just seemed like a off-the-cuff comment to the go out with the thing. Then she wouldn't have then, it's like that if you don't ask, like, she wouldn't have then been like, oh, well, I can XYZ, and then you and I got talking, and here I am talking to you, and the more, like, you speak about this stuff, the more, the things will actually be put out to help you do that. But, like, also with goals is, okay, have a goal, but determining how exactly every single little detail of that looks, or the exact, like, steps to get there, you need to let go of your attachment to that. So, like, that's a big thing as well, like, being really attached to things, because I think it's Buddha, attachment is the cause of all suffering. Yeah. Because when you're being like, okay, this is my idea, my goal, or this is where I'm going, but also not being necessarily attached to it, because that's when, with dentistry, and you talk about, okay, there's some maybe more complex treatment plans, or this, or, because there's lots of, like, business things that they talk about in communication. The biggest thing that's helped me is literally, one, not deciding for people what they want to do, but giving them, their range of options, helping guide them in what I think is in their best interest, because it's not their area of expertise, of course. But also not being attached to them saying yes to things. And you can do that in any sort of, like, I know that sounds weird with dentistry, because you don't say that with sales because it's healthcare, but in the same breath, people, like, okay, here's this, but not necessarily being attached to someone saying yes, or coming onto your course, or, being like, yes, this is here, I'm, I think that this is going to be great, but also, like, losing that attachment, because let's go back to, like, dentistry or cars, selling cars or something. Everyone can feel, like, that desperate energy if someone has, like, is attached, or, like, has something in it from someone trying to say yes, or, like, and it makes you not want, let's say you're buying a car, you're like, oh, I can feel that desperate energy that they have to, I don't know, sell this car to make their quota for the week, or whatever it is, and it puts people off. Like I think most people can feel that amount of energy. Like you and me were talking about being like empaths, but yeah, I think most people can feel that sort of desperate energy when someone's trying, so attached to you, saying yes to something. You're talking about like being needing, like in a relationship as well, like if you're talking like about the vibrations of energy, like for being attracted or repulsed about people, that's I think a huge one, right?
I didn't understand what was so bad about it until I experienced it myself from someone who did the exact same thing to me, and then I recognized it straight away. And when I experienced it, I went, oh, okay, so that's where I've been going wrong. I didn't understand that in my mind it was coming from a place of love, but really it was not. It was coming from these horrible emotions that I was emitting, not knowing that, and people were just drawn away from it. Like,
so you get repelled. Well, that's, you talked about before, I meant to say, but I've been working on not interrupting. It's not my strong suit. Yeah, you're saying, you can understand something, but if you haven't exactly gone with it, there's a big difference between understanding something and knowing it. Like, I used to understand what a broken arm is. I'm like, yeah, you got an arm, bones break. Like, I understand what that is. A couple of years ago, I broke my arm, and I know now what it feels like to have a broken arm. And it's like you talking about like the neediness, like having a conscious conversation with her afterwards, you could probably be like, okay, like I understand, like I kind of get it. But often things don't like you don't know something until you've experienced it, and then you don't forget it.
No, you don't.
You can be like, oh, I get it, but you can't. It's like people saying, I understand if they've lost a parent or whatever. Both my parents are still alive, so I can't. It's different. I can understand. I can be there. I can whatever you need. I don't know. When people say, oh, I know what you're going through. Do you? Because if you haven't gone through this, then yes, your support is still valid, but it's a different level of getting it right.
Well, I mean, it's sad that I actually have been that kind of person, but at the same time, it's something that I've had a lot of trouble at, like being open about. But it's like, well, if I'm not open about this, how can I learn? Like, how can I improve on being a better human being unless I'm willing to accept the fact I've got to be vulnerable, I've got to admit this is who I've been. People that know me will know that fact, that if I try and hide that and say, no, I wasn't that person, I was this person, then the people that have met me through those periods of time will go, no, actually, that's not true. You were actually a very needy, rah. And that's where I feel like I have to be completely honest on my podcast, that it's okay to not have to have imperfections. None of us are perfect, but in order for me to better myself as an individual, I need to be willing to be open about some of the things that I stuffed up on and learn to accept that's who I was. But as long as I keep learning from it and growing, then it's just the person I used to be, not the person I am now.
Yeah, and there'll be times where that default comes through. Like there's times with me and I'm just like, I'll say to my partner, I'm sorry, I'm being so needy. And sometimes, and that's one thing, you're talking about like meeting someone. Every single, personality trait has a light side and a shadow side. You were talking about like the monster and Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
You can maybe see that as, aggression. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people be like, oh, aggression is bad. Okay, well, aggression is bad if it's, out of context and it's directed at people who don't, there's no threat or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, but if, let's say, you talk about aggression again, okay, you've got a mob of people with bats trying to get into the house and attack you guys, like, okay, now that trait could be able to use aggression in the context where it's relevant is actually really a positive thing. So every single thing someone has is got a shadow side and a light side. Ambition, for example, that can be very, attractive when someone's really a bit ambitious. the shadow side of that is that they might always be working and then they're never home and they're having to put in lots of hours and you feel like you're, not a priority.
Yeah.
Or, just talking about people pleasing. Agreeableness, having high agreeableness is actually, can be really, positive.
Well, I think being too agreeable is also a negative thing too.
You need to be agreeableness is good as long as you've also got integrity.
Yeah.
So, my first husband, highly agreeable, really low integrities, because it didn't matter what would happen. He'd be like, yeah, you're right. So in the moment, we would never have any sort of argument, but he wouldn't have the integrity to follow through. And so, whereas my partner now is actually really low on agreeableness, right? Really high on integrity. So I know, he'll say to me, hey, look, I don't have the capacity right now to whatever need is that I might be asking or whatever of him. Because he's so integral though, like he's so consistent with that, like I really respect him. Even though like in the moment would I be like, oh, but I want you, I need you to, yeah, probably. But I'm also, there's enough there to be like, no, I really respect that about you because you've communicated really clearly with me what capacity you have energy-wise, and you've really been able to stick to it. So although in the moment I can be like, oh, it's actually led for like way healthier ways of being able to show up because...
Well, I mean, I think that's also an important thing, is that a man has his own point of view and his own identity, and if he isn't willing to, I mean, I understand no matter what relationship you're in, you're going to have disagreements. You're not going to see eye to eye on everything.
Usually.
And that's something that a lot of people, including myself, would probably make, that when you're in a relationship, you're worried that if you disagree with them in what you would actually disagree with, you're worried it's going to lead to a fight. But it's like, well, if you approach it in a manner where it's not necessarily going to lead to a fight, it's just going to lead to a discussion. The only way it'll lead to a fight is if you start putting emotion in it.
Well, conflict is also completely normal, and emotions are also normal, but it's like, okay, are we having conflict and then having repair? Are we having a resolution? Did this have an outcome, or are we just going round in circles? And look, I feel like there's always one fight that's like a round in circles thing. I'm not sure. It's like, oh, this is coming around again. But, and sometimes as well, just accepting things are what they are, and really, I guess really coming down to it, like, what do I really value? What is really important to me, and what things am I going to have to let go of? Because, you're never going to create this perfect relationship or person, and, there's going to be things that, piss you off about them, and or that you wish were different, and some things it's like, okay, is this a deal breaker? Is this something we can grow towards together? Or is this something I'm going to have to let go of and choose to accept?
Yeah.
Because it won't change, and I'm still in this knowing that. And that's a big one.
Yeah, it can be...
like consciously deciding, because otherwise you just end up...
I mean, especially if you love that person, but you can also see that this isn't going to work. It's a very, very tough thing for someone to actually tell themselves, I love them, but it's not going to work out. I need to leave because there's no future progress with this person, because they just will not talk. They won't.
You need to have aligned values.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have aligned values with your partner, then things are going to drift away, because like a lot of what led to the dissolution of my marriage was me, I was growing and becoming like more conscious, and these were really interesting to me, and he was a bit more still just stuck in the stuff with him, and there's all sorts. FIFO life is awful, and anyone who's in WA, and we have such a great relationship now, as friends and co-parents. It's amazing. But where was I going with this? Yeah, like coming back to, okay, what do you value, and where are you going? Like there were some things, decisions he made, life stuff that weren't really aligned with mine, and anyway, but I think coming back to having aligned values tends to be pretty important.
So you think maybe the first thing you should do on, like for a first date or something, is to actually make sure that you both have the same values? like to see the same point of view with where you want to be and who you are as an individual. And if you don't have that same core value, like parenting type of things, like if you don't agree on how you want to parent your child.
Yeah, like one of my high values is autonomy. So I parent in a way that gives my children autonomy to figure out who they are rather than being told who they should be and how they have to behave. Yes, I'm teaching them in certain environments there's certain rules, and there's different rules at dad's than here and at school, or it doesn't, and then those are the settings that we need to have certain behaviours. But one of my highest values is autonomy, and that's how I practice dentistry. I don't tell people, I say, look,
Do it.
we can go anywhere from never come back again, call me if you've got a swollen face, to Hollywood smile. But this is, I can give you some ideas somewhere, usually for most people somewhere in between that's what's reasonable. But the amount of times I say to people, it's your teeth, it's not my teeth. I don't have an attachment for what they choose. Yes, I'm going to guide them to make some choices that align with their values, because people look at dentistry and you look at expense and go, is that for a filling or that for a thing? The amount of people who I see who are in their 60s, 70s, and they don't have a functioning dentition, you're not paying for a piece of like resin or a bit of ceramic or whatever. It's you're paying to like values. So do you value being able to go out for a meal and being able to think, hey, what do I feel like eating? Not what can I chew or what can I, those are. I guess I'm kind of getting into sort of being influential now as well, because if I can find out, what my patients value, I can help them with what they want. And some people, they're like, I get people and every time I see them, it's just, I'll just pull it out to the next one. And that's when you got to like learn to read the person, because a lot of those people are like, mate, she'll be right, just pull it out. And often they're this is generalizing, but often they're tradies or in mining, FIFO, and sometimes I'll just look at them and be like, you must really like soup, do you, mate? And they're like, what? And they're like, not really. And I'm like, hey, look, like if you only ever come when things are so bad, and this is obviously, I know that there's really blocks, but if I can sort of talk to them in a way that they can sort of then get it, I'm just like, if you lose a few more, you're really going to struggle to eat some of the stuff you like. So, and often these guys, they look like they like their food. Yeah. And so then I've linked that to something that they value, and then I can say, hey, look, if we can, and then make it digestible. Like, how sometimes we set about a goal and being like, this feels too much, I'm going to do nothing. You get that analysis paralysis. So I'm like, look, let's break it down to like manageable chunks so that we can keep you chewing steaks at 85 or 106, I don't know. We went off on a tangent there, but like figuring out what people value is really important with relationships, or when you're working with people in any sort of profession. People have this perception of how they think they should look as well, and I know myself, like when I was dating, like the whole like gym shot and abs, like yes, I can see like you're conventionally attractive, and this is, especially with social media, is telling you what you should look like. All I mostly see when I see that is, let's say I'll be looking to like date them or have a relationship, I'm like, we're not going out for pizza and beers, are we? Like I love going out for pizzas and beers. And although I would, want to support like health and fitness and things like that, when it's sort of often at that level, it people then assume, which is quite right, some sorts of lifestyles, which then very well might not align with mine, or, So I think as I've gotten older, I've definitely like been very much like the energy of someone as well. It makes me find, I think the most attractive things about someone are the curious. Like if someone is a very curious person, I think that's really attractive. And also just someone who's like wanting to grow and like also, serve others and like help and make a difference. Like that to me is like really attractive qualities. But I'm not a very visual person at all. Like, I think it's like a lot of women nowadays, they're programmed through social media that it's not just about looks anymore. I mean, it is a huge factor, but it's mostly about a man's status, how much money does he make, and a lot of the time I contemplate on just telling some women, like, if this man had a Ferrari and he was
he was a millionaire, but he would sometimes cheat on you, but he would give you the materialistic things that you wanted. But
some women would take that deal.
Yeah.
And a lot wouldn't.
I try figure that out, but because I don't know how women think. And
everyone thinks differently.
Yeah, exactly, and it's like
but, yeah.
women in general, they all don't think the same way. They all have their own interests, their own likes. Like, not every chick likes the same man. Not every chick likes the same thing. Not the same qualities. They like the same music. Like, and it's very hard to read certain individuals because some of them are very good at being closed off. They won't always be upfront and direct with what they want or what they want in you or how they think of you. It's very difficult to understand how their minds work.
But then you can be fun with it. You can just be like, imagine I have a magic wand and I could like wave it, or like you get a wish, like one wave of it and your life looks exact like how you get the exact life that you want.
Yeah.
Well, how does it look? Like, what does it look like? And that would tell you a lot of what you need to know about somebody.
I mean, for me, ideally, I don't want multiple relationships anymore. Like, that's what I was like when I was young. But my grandfather taught me a lot about life, and he said you need to just find yourself one good woman who is going to see where you're wanting to go, and she's going to be by your side and back you up and keep inspiring you and keep lifting you up, rather than bringing you down and making you feel stupid for mistakes and making you constantly insecure because she might be talking to other men. Where I feel like I need that individual that will make me secure and knowing that she's got my back no matter what. I don't have to worry about her talking to other men, or if she is talking to them, I know nothing's happening because it's just it's either because she's doing it through work or there's other aspects of it. Like, I can't stop my partner from talking to a man in general because she may have to through work or through anything. But my whole point of it is that I need to know that I can trust her to make the smart decision of not cheating, because that is my biggest concern. Like, I don't want to spend my entire life building something with someone, or even build up my life just to have one person come along and then destroy it.
But that's like, okay, if you get to a point where you are so happy and so, your self-love and self-worth and your life is so amazing as it is without having a partner, that having that person is only enhancing that, because your base is so solid, that you would never worry about that then, because because you have proof and you've lived that you're fine.
By yourself.
You're fine. And that I hope my partner, respects me and loves me enough to make choices. But you can't, the more that you would think about that or try to control it or whatever, you actually kind of manifest that actually happening. And actually, I was talking to someone, and his girlfriend was always really like paranoid. She'd been cheated on before. She was paranoid that, cheated on before by someone else. Was really paranoid that, they were going to cheat on her. And got to the point I was having a conversation with him, and basically her always being on about it and suspicious and checking up and wanting to do things. I'm like, you're basically being punished and you haven't even done the crime. So, and then he came and he's like, yeah, so what you're saying is if I'm going to have the punishment, I may as well at least get to do the crime. And I'm like, which it's a bad one, but like if you're already, basically being affected by like you have done the thing, you might as well do the damn thing. Enjoy. I'm not saying I'm not endorsing cheating, but that's when I was like, she's the one who needs to work on that stuff, because it's actually probably pushing you towards doing the thing she's trying to stop you doing, So, and they ended up breaking up anyway after a couple of years, which because it was pretty easy to see that wasn't really matched really well. But
I think that's what I was talking about in the beginning, is that if you don't fix the insecurities that other people cause, you'll drag that into your next relationship. And that is probably one of the hardest things for me, is like my past relationships have all been pretty bad, never really worked out because I wasn't the person I wanted or I could be. And I constantly have to keep reevaluating myself, that like I can't just jump in a relationship just yet because I still haven't fully healed from certain things.
And
Like,
you
my
won't, and you
trust
won't.
issues
Like,
are
you can't wait until you're like this
fully healed.
perfect, fully healed person before you know, because relationships can be really healing because they show up, you know, they give you chance to practice. You know, oh yeah, like I've done all this inner work on myself, and it's all kind of been like in theory, and now you're like out and putting it into practice, you know, and it's like, oh, this is the, you know, I've been talking about this, and here it's an exact situation where I had to, like, you know, basically walk my talk. And there's nothing much better for that than a romantic relationship, I'll tell you that. Because you'll still get, like, you know, your triggers will still happen. But having that awareness of, okay, I'm going to try and catch it sooner, like, oh, I've been triggered. But because sometimes you're like, oh, you don't realise till later, and then at least having the awareness later, okay, cool, now I can go back and say, hey, sorry, babe, I was so triggered by blah, blah, blah. I know I reacted badly, and I'm sorry. To, you know, like, being able to be more aware, like, sooner and sooner and sooner until, you know, that just becomes less and less. But, you know, giving yourself grace and, like, loving yourself for being like, yeah, I am a human and I acted imperfectly, and I also did a repair, like, you know, teaching my kids about, you know, conflict, but also, you know, repairing. Like, am I always like the ideal mother and do the parenting I want? Absolutely not. I lose my shit sometimes. And then, you know, like I will, you know, or I'll, you know, I'll speak to them how I say, you know, we don't speak to people like that. And I've just yelled about something or whatever. But then I'll come back and be like, hey, like, I'm really sorry I yelled. Like, we've talked about, you know, you do nice ways to talk and speak to people, and I didn't do that with you before, and I'm sorry. And that teaches my kids, okay, mum's a human, she fucks up too. And then she comes in and does a repair.
I mean, that's where I've had to admit to myself that I have fucked up in relationships, and that's the thing where it's like, okay, I did this wrong, now I've got to learn from it, you know, I've got to make sure that I don't repeat that action. But that's where I've had to constantly keep teaching myself over these years, and I think I still got so much more I've got to learn, but I'll learn as I go, just like with this, like I'll learn as I go, I'll keep going, I'll keep practicing it, and eventually it'll just come natural. But I've accepted the fact that with podcasting in particular that some people take 5 years, some people take 10 years before they actually develop the mastery skills of actually getting to where they wanted to be. But a lot of them have all said sometimes you got to accept the true hard fact. You got to be a disaster before you can become a master.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I've done some business courses for some of my stuff that I've sort of half got out online, and then sort of hit life things that slowed that down. And I probably will do it. It's just juggle, trying to juggle energy levels and work and kids and everything. But I saw some of like their early works of, you know, this, and they're like, I can't
do this. With podcasting, that so many times have I heard someone talk about something and I've gone, oh, that's actually a very true point. I've gone through that, and I feel like if you don't talk about vulnerable things or you talk about real life, people out there aren't going to resonate with your message. You've got to really be open with certain things, and I'm sure that there are people out there that are going through the same experiences or the mindsets, and how do I get better? How do I let go of a traumatic past? Like, it really depends on what you've been through, but at the end of the day, like, it's all just about, I can do this no matter what. Just got to have that belief in yourself that it will get better.
And that everything's always fine. Everything's always fine. It'll all be fine. Like, you know, like, yeah, today was hard, or this moment is hard, and what are the things I can, you know, like, I literally keep a list on my phone, because when I'm in like a bad space, I sometimes can't like remember like what things make me feel good. So I have a list, like, okay, when I do these things, I feel better. Like we were talking about like exercise before, because sometimes when you're in like a dark place, you can't think of things. So I'm just like, okay, like I'll go down to the beach, or yes, I'll, you know, and then I'm like, oh, I do.
Well, I often find a good way to snap me out of a bad headspace as soon as I wake up to start a good day is I practice gratitude, and I practice the things that I'm grateful for in my life.
Absolutely.
And I've often found the more I do it, the more I can add to my list, and then it makes me realise, oh, I'm actually quite blessed. I've taken so much for granted. Like for example, I'm grateful that I can still see, that I can still hear, that I've got a bed, I've got a roof over my head, I've got clean water at my disposal.
Yeah.
There's so many things that we don't think about on a day-to-day basis that we're just so accustomed to because it's always there.
Yeah.
But if you just practice that gratitude every day, you're like, oh, I actually feel good because I've got so much to be thankful for. And
Absolutely.
you focus on what you have rather than what you don't have. Life will actually start giving you more, because it's like giving a present to someone. If you gave someone a present and they were ungrateful for it, would you really want to give them another present again? But if they showed that gratitude, like even if they didn't like it, but they're like, oh, thank you so much, I really appreciate it.
Because there's always something, let's say someone gives you something that's not, like it's awful, I don't know what it is.
Like it's shitty.
You can still be grateful for the fact that they thought of you.
Yeah.
Like that's, like there's always something, isn't there?
Yeah, there's always something.
One last thing to get though, because
Yeah.
I went there. Huge, got really into the habit of, being grateful, and it just became a thing. But that's when you get just being careful not to get into like that toxic positivity, like everything's fine and like shit's burning down around you. Like it's okay to feel righteous anger. It's okay to be like things are shit right now. You don't have to put a positive spin on every single little thing. Like allowing that and not staying in it and dwelling on it and freaking living there. But you can, there's definitely like toxic positivity as well, you know. Like,
you've got to constantly understand that your emotions aren't always going to be in a positive state, and I don't think positive is necessarily being happy. I think being positive is just knowing that I'm going through a shit phase right now, or something's not going the way I want it to, but it'll be okay because I know I'll get through it because I've gotten through things like this before.
But I also just, you're talking about like being not neutral, but like, how he just said about, this emotion's like a message, or like every, attribute has like a shadow and a light. Like it is what it is, and I can view it like this, or I can view it like that, So, like that's like this whole like body positivity, and I'm like, yeah, great. There's an actress, I think she's the one on The Good Place, not Kristen Bell. Anyway. She's had a real like body, journey, and she's just like, I want to be from a place of body neutrality, like, because when you're positive, sometimes you're like forcing it almost, and I'm just like, I want to think about like my body like kids do, like I've got one, it takes me around, like,
Who cares?
I'm going to fuel it with things that make it feel good, rather than, yes, it's important to cheerlead, but also just not investing lots of time and energy in any sort of way about things that are just detrimental. Does that make sense? Like, I don't really think about...
Like, it's one thing to look after your physical health, but if it's making you completely miserable and there's no positives that you feel are coming from it, then it's understandable, because, like, I've been putting myself through physical exercise every single day, but there has been times where I've gotten to the point where I've not only been doing the physical exercise, but I've been doing all this studying, and I've had work and all these types of things, and it kind of got to a point where it's like I'm emotionally and physically drained. I think I need a day just to rest. The work is,
that's what I said. You have to rest. And
yeah, because otherwise, if I don't rest and recover, when I want to attack something next, I'm not going to have the energy I need to attack it with everything I got, because I'm just too tired.
And also, it sounds like, you've had like a real journey about your own self-worth. Yes, you're doing amazing things, and yes, you should celebrate those. But you don't want to be like, oh, my self-worth used to be attached to, girls liking me, and now I've attached it to what I can achieve. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so like,
exactly
like I'm only worthy if I'm being productive. No, like sit on the couch and, be careful with too much doom scrolling and things. But, that's why I create art, and I just create it just to make shit. Yeah. I've got piles of just stuff that I've just made just cause.
Yeah,
You know, because I don't want to link everything I have to do has to have an outcome or has to have a thing, because I just also want to just like live my life and enjoy my life, like, you know, and we get really, yes, it's a healthier way, but like that whole more or never enough, like chasing things. Sometimes you need to sit in what you've created and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I just need to stop sort of doing or putting so much pressure on myself sometimes.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
yeah,
just,
like I just need to just sit sometimes and just recognize, like, I may not be where I want to be, but it's not going to be. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon.
that's what I was going to say. You don't want to run out of steam, and then, you know.
So sometimes it's good to just stop, take a look back, only to see how far you've come, and just to be proud of that, and say, well, like, I'm not getting to where I want fast, but I have made steps forward. I'm
going in the right direction.
Yeah,
I'm moving towards rather than
rather than going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've had to really accept, that it's not going to be a quick fix like that, just like that. Like, it's going to take time where you actually need to have a bit more patience and stop putting yourself through so much crap, and just keep going and keep putting the work in, but don't exhaust yourself to the point where you can't keep going and you give up on your goal because you just can't keep up.
Yeah.
And that's where I've got to learn to not take on so many things at once. And
it's finding that little balance.
finding
also,
the balance.
And, you know, with the exercise, like trying to connect with your body as well, because taking on too many things at once, especially for people like us who have been like people pleasers, is for me like trying to pause and be like, how does it feel to say yes to this? And how does it feel to say no? Because sometimes you just go to your default, or you don't think about it, or you think, oh, it'll be fine. But then when you've said yes, you can feel like when you've said yes to something you really want to say no to. So like really paying attention to those subtleties, because then you'll find it's easier to look after yourself. You know, and knowing, okay,
this is what I really
if I'm feeling resistance, why? Because, you know, me like going to the gym, I'll be like, why? Yeah, I
often have to just remind myself, I'm not Superman. I'm not like these other entrepreneurs. I never really try and compete with other people.
You should only compete with yourself.
I'm only competing with myself for who I was yesterday, and try to make sure I'm getting better every single day. But that's when I notice, whenever I compare myself to others, it feels a little discouraging, because it's like, oh, these guys are running 50, 100k marathons, and these entrepreneurs have this better setup, or they've got a lot more better ways of getting words out. But it's like, well, at the end of the day, they've been doing it a lot longer.
But also, like, you know, and I've gotten to this, oh, why should I bother doing X, Y, Z? There's already blah, 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 blah out there doing basically the same thing and better than me, and they've got this, so why would I bother? I don't know if you've gone there. Maybe you won't. But like this conversation today, sometimes it's literally you and your experiences and your like combination of things and how you present yourself and talk that's going to be able to connect with some people in that unique way that person may not actually find. Like, I've had people recommend things and I'm like, not gelling with it, but then they're like, this was, you know, so it's always something, you know, you can always help somebody. The way that you do things is always going to be the right way that someone needs. So that's really, you know,
it's workful.
What you need to come back to is, you know, why are you doing this? And you obviously want to help people, and then you also want to, you know, move some places with your life, which is super cool.
Yeah, like I feel like I would still want to keep improving on my life, but I thought, well, why not have conversations where it's recorded and people can learn as well as myself. Like that's the whole idea of the journey, is I'm going to grow, and while I'm growing, so can my audience, and it'll be amazing to actually have people that have started at the beginning with me watch me grow, and then when I get to my destination, for them to go, well, I've learnt everything you've learnt over the years because I've watched all your videos and I've grown just like you have. My life's changed because of your show, and that's really it's not the ultimate goal. I mean, I just want to help people in general, but if someone was to tell me that they've been watching from the beginning and to see me where I'm at now, they'd and then say that my life changed just as much as yours has, then that'd be huge.
It is, and you know, you often won't hear from most of the people you impact, you never hear. And it's like, even like with dentistry, you know, like often, you know, I'll send them back, but I don't really know, you know, like if they came in pain and I sorted them out, like I'm like, hope they're better. Like usually they call me if they're not. But even just having like that little bit of impact, and knowing that, you know, the responses you get are only often a drop in the ocean of the actual impact that you actually have, you know, because I mean, I started just talking and sharing, and I did some Facebook lives on some courses that I did, and I just got up there to be like, I don't know, just here and talk shit, because I don't know, I think they did like a challenge for the first one. But I had so many people be like, oh, and like, I really liked how you said this, or I liked that idea, or that really had an impact on me. And then I was like, like, I'm kind of helping people by just like showing up and being myself and talking about things that I like to talk about, which was super cool, you know. So I don't know, it's nice to feel like you've impacted people.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll impact a lot of women with your words of wisdom today.
We'll see. Well, thank you.
I really appreciate that you come on and help share some of your experiences, and hopefully a lot of people actually learn from
I'm sure
it.
they will.